15th, 1992, Richard saddled up old number 43 for the 1185th time. But this time, it's different. The career that spanned generations ends here. Imagine the memories this last time in the cockpit that was his sanctuary from the crowds and the cameras. And now memories are all that remain. Spectacular to the end, Richard's exit scene was a fireworks display. But they fixed his car after this big crash, and he took that final checker. The thud in mid-race and the fire that followed were not enough to keep the king from ending his day in style. If indeed life is a canvas we fill with our own brush, then Richard Petty is a Rembrandt among racers. His life story, an intricate and colorful masterpiece. Its title, very simple. Portrait of a King is presented by the First Brands Corporation.
Impressive array of Sam Bass images of Richard Petty provide the backdrop for our Portrait of a King. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Despain. We welcome you. It is now official. Richard Petty's career as a driver is over. He is the only man in sport whose retirement could have created all the fuss that we've seen here today and indeed all season long. The phenomenon begs for comparison. I'm reminded of Jabbar's last campaign, all those emotional tributes in arenas that he played for the final time. But there's a big difference. Basketball was there before Kareem hit the boards. Stock car racing is entirely a product of Richard Petty's lifetime. From the motorized backwoods brawls that lured his daddy to the current love affair with the Fortune 500, Richard has lived and breathed the creation of the sport. He is its biggest star, indeed, its embodiment. And having given us so much, now he's given us the Fan Appreciation Tour.
We have reached the end of Richard Petty's driving career. Our racing masterpiece we'll admire in detail when we come back. Portrait of a King.
Never thought about setting records. I just went out and did what I wanted to do and was real fortunate to be able to do what I did. And in the meantime, the records came along.
All right, Richard, I'll buy that. You didn't set out to rewrite the stock car record book. It just happened that way. But those records are important here because they are the milestones. And one by one, they mark the path that Richard traveled from gangly North Carolina kid to the king of stock car racing to something more than that. Let's go to John Kernan in our nation's capital.
Here in Washington, D.C., where this museum, the Smithsonian, houses some of our country's greatest milestones, Richard is also included, along with pieces of Americana that have helped shape our nation's history. As the car that accomplished win number 200 back in 1984 sits quietly in this hall, its presence here truly puts into perspective the enormity of Richard's achievements.
Richard recorded his first historic achievement back in May 1967 as he notched career win number 55, bypassing his father's record of 54. Not even a famed Darlington stripe could stop Richard from cashing in the money that day, although his father Lee was there in victory lane to help him pick up the check. But But the victory celebration was far from over that season. Teaming with brother Maurice, the Petty boys ran off with an unbelievable 27 wins that year, including 10 in a row. Records that still stand today and likely will never be challenged.
That particular record of 27 wins in, 47 races or 46 races, whatever we run, they don't run that many races now. You know, some of the records and stuff that might be completely out of the realm of possibility because the circumstances now and the system is so much different than what it was when I came through.
As the 60s came to a close, America focused on the unknowns of space exploration as man walked on the moon. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Richard Petty was exploring his own uncharted territory, picking up career win number 100.
In Bowman Gray Stadium in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 1969, quarter-mile flat asphalt track around the football field.
As the years passed, Petty continued his exploration of the unknown, logging his 100,000th mile in 1972 at Ontario. And some 11 years later, a young cable network got a thrill of its own, covering a little bit of history. Bob Jenkins makes the call.
Bill Elliott from Dawsonville, Georgia, looking for his first win onto the Tri-Oval. Still, Richard Petty leads the way as we have 2 laps to go. This is the final lap at Rockingham, less than a mile to go. Here they come toward the 4th turn, and the start-finish line coming up. Bill Elliott will make one desperate attempt as he goes to the inside. Richard Petty holds him off, and Richard Petty picks up a victory at Rockingham, North Carolina Motor Speedway, his first since 1981, and the crowd celebrates with King Richard. It's been a long time since he was in victory lane, and ESPN has brought you his victory live this afternoon.
It was emotional for me. I told them I was glad I had my sunglasses on where they couldn't see how emotional I got. But when your daughters do something like that in front of all the people, and like I say, it's thousands start, that was a big, another one of our big days.
It's Richard Petty. He revs up the STV Pontiac. Yarborough hounding him. It's just nose to tail on the back straightaway.
Up ahead, 5 slower cars as they move for turn number 3. Yarborough now dives to the inside, tries to get inside the STV Pontiac. He's not there. Now he is up beside Richard Petty as they hit turn 3.
Yarborough down low. Petty's up the banking. Yarborough pulls up in front of him. Petty right up on his bumper, points his nose down inside. They race back to the checkers. A lap car ahead. Petty right down to the apron. They're side by side.
Richard drafts down to the bottom of the racetrack. They are door to door in the dog leg. They touch coming to the Tri-Oval down to the line. It's Richard Petty by a foot. Petty wins his 200th career NASCAR victory.
The only record I ever really wanted was the 200th one, and that when I got it, I couldn't do no more. But that was the only one that I really tried to get.
Richard Petty really is one of our country's great pioneers, truly deserving of his place in American history.
If I set a goal and got to it, I didn't set it high enough, and then if I set one and never did get it, then I was always going to be disappointed. But I always looked at the situation of saying, you know, let's just do better today than we did yesterday, and I always felt like we'd go forward that way.
$10 down, $10 a month. That's all you need at Print.
Bit of blue that was left over from a 55 Dodge, and I had some white left over from a 57 Chevrolet. And you know, if we mixed it together, it was going to be enough paint to paint the car. So we mixed it together, and we probably had a gallon of paint, a gallon and a half, whatever it took to paint the car. Had enough paint to paint the car. we got through and said, hey, man, that's pretty. The sunglasses came about when we used to run a lot of dirt tracks and stuff. I wore those bubble goggles, and they kept getting sweaty and to get dust in behind them and stuff. And, you know, again, my eyes were always sensitive to light, so I got to wearing sunglasses. And then I got to wearing them in the race car. And I got this particular kind that was wrapped around that, you know, the wind would go around them, and you didn't sweat in them anyway. They'd get dirty, but you wouldn't sweat. And then the hat and stuff, I guess it came about probably in early 70s, somewhere along there. Just got in the habit of wearing a cowboy hat. It was one of those deals where if I had a STP hat on, I was talking to the Pontiac people, or if I was talking to the Pontiac people, I had a Goodyear hat on, or talking to Goodyear people, I had a Goodies hat on. So, you know, it just kind of messed up stuff. So I just got in the habit of wearing a hat, and kind of worked out good. Works out good if the sun's shining, or works out good if it's raining. We got with STP in 1972, and you know, up until then, I was real fortunate that most of the time we had factory backing, so we sent a car on to Riverside, and myself and Dale Inman and my brother Maurice went by Chicago to see Andy about a sponsorship. Now this is like 3 days before the race, before the season started. I mean, that's how business oriented we were. You know, everything worked out.
An STP paint job, a pair of shades, and a cowboy hat. We could add to that list and find here in Sam Bass's paintings the rag between the teeth, boots in place of fancy driving shoes, and of course that big number 43. Forget the crown and the scepter. The reign of Richard Petty is marked by symbols unique to this particular king. And there's one more stock car icon synonymous with the Petty name. Just as Yankee Stadium became the house that Babe Ruth built, so too did the most famous track in Richard's sport emerge as his personal domain. Let's go there now and hear from Dr. Jerry Punch.
In IndyCar racing, it's the Brickyard. In stock car racing, there is no more hallowed ground than Daytona International Speedway. Many drivers will complete their careers without ever once visiting Victory Lane here at the World Center of Racing. One man and one man only has won the Daytona 500 7 times. We're talking about the king, Richard Petty. So who better to name an achievement award for accomplishments here at Daytona than this man? You know, millions of fans have enjoyed his accomplishments week after week, but it takes a fellow competitor to really understand how difficult those achievements actually were.
In 1964, I was in my 5th year of stock car racing, and Richard was entering his 7th. And what took me 16 years later to accomplish, Richard Petty did that February.
When he won that Daytona 500 in 1964, that's when it, and under very adverse conditions, that's when I thought, hey, this guy's got something. And despite having a lot of tire trouble and having to make an extra pit stop, he kept his cool and won the race.
In 1966, Richard won his 2nd Daytona 500 in a rain-shortened race. He would go on to win the Daytona 500 6 times before I'd end up in Victory Lane. But one of my best early shots at victory came when I was teammates with Richard in 1971.
Richard Petty, Randall, North Carolina, has won the Daytona 500 for the 3rd time.
Richard Petty wins the Daytona 500, the first man to ever win it 4 times. And the STP cheering section, turn 1 goes wild. Richard Petty has just won the Daytona 500 for Andy Granatelli.
All right, Petty is coming around to take the checkers in the battle for the 2nd place. We'll go all the way around the speedway one more time. Here come those cars fighting for 2nd across the line. There's the checker rod, and the STP Dodge of Richard Petty has won the Daytona 500.
They're out of turn 2. They're down the backstretch. Here goes Cale on the inside. Cale makes the move. He's down very close to the grass. Down he tries to shut him off. Cale's in the grass. Cale loses it. He tries to pull it back. Down he side by side. They make contact. Both head toward the wall. They hit the wall. In turn number 3, we'll have a new leader.
Here they come to the stripe. Richard Petty's STP Oldsmobile. Waltrip dives to the inside. Petty almost put him off in the grass, and Richard Petty will win the Daytona 500.
1980 was finally my year at Daytona. But in 1981, the man who challenged Richard was Bobby Allison.
In 1978, I won my first Daytona 500, while in 1980, I finished 2nd to Buddy. So in 1981, I was ready for victory number 2 in the 500. But Richard was looking for his 7th. And when it was all over, it came down to pit strategy. The team leaders were telling me, you know, we got to run easy, we got to go easy. And I was saying we need to go ahead and go when we ran out of gas. Richard Petty was sitting there, pitted at the proper time, and coasting around that racetrack out of gas is what cost the race.
In this Richard Petty's final year of competition, racetracks all across the country have added thousands of these seats. And even that wasn't enough to accommodate the millions of fans who wanted their chance to say farewell to the King. Ironically, many of those fans weren't even born when Richard Petty won his first of 7 Winston Cup championships.
The year was 1964. Lyndon B. Johnson was president, but a youthful Richard Petty was about to establish himself as the king. Over the next 11 years, the victories mounted and the championships followed. But it was his 7th and final title, won with an incredible comeback over a young Darrell Waltrip, that remains his most cherished.
That was a dramatic situation, coming back from not doing good the year before and then coming back all the way that year and then winding up winning the championship. So it was a very gratifying championship.
In many sports, stardom is flickering. It goes as quickly as it comes. Arguably, no other sports legend has impacted their sport this century as much as Richard Petty. Throughout his career, which spans some 5 decades, the legend of the King has been witnessed and enjoyed by generation after generation. And although he may no longer drive, in the hearts of millions of fans, long will live the King.
And his presence has been endlessly hyped. Richard, for one, and I, for two, will be glad to see the end of the hype. Point is, if we judge this career by what's been said in the last 12 months, there wouldn't be a wart in sight. And in fact, what Richard said a long time ago was, it ain't always pretty. Amid all the highlights, there were also controversial run-ins with other drivers, complaints that the Pettys were the privileged haves in a world of have-nots. There was, do I dare say, cheating in the context of the King. Call it creative interpretation of the rules. And worst of all, there were those crashes. Benny Parsons has some thoughts on the bad times.
You're right, Dave. Richard Petty has had many bad things happen to him, but a lot of good things as well. Probably none better when they dedicated the statue to the King. But Richard Petty, like most race car drivers, remember the bad things much better than the good. He'll probably never forget Darlington, 1970.
That was one of the worst wrecks I had. Broke the steer, and the car come down to the inside, turned over 4 or 5 times, and my arm kept coming out the window, and look, it really, really looked bad. When we got to him, the car was upside down, and his arms, you know, he's long and lanky, and his arm was just limp laying in the car, and you know, the first thing I thought that he was dead, you know, and of course I'm in the car with him, and when I unstrapped the belts, and we're trying to hold him, you know, a big lanky body like that, he hit pretty hard when he did come down, and he groaned, and so I knew he was alive.
The 1976 Daytona 500, a classic Petty-David Pearson battle, results in the ugliest but most memorable finish in history.
As they hit the banking, they're 3 abreast with a lap car. Pearson moves in front of the STP Dodge. Petty comes back to the inside. They almost touch as they move down low in the banking. They're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line. Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? He's still moving. The car stops 300, 400 feet shy of the finish line. Pearson is still running. Here's Petty trying to fire to come across the line. David Pearson moving down through as they come to the stripe. The winner is car number 21.
At the time, he didn't know it, but he had me beat. If he hadn't come over and you know, and we hit, people want to know if I was mad, and I said no. I remember exactly what I said. I said, no, I'm not mad. But if I hadn't won the race, I believe it would have been, you know.
After Pearson, Richard's biggest rivalry came with Bobby Allison.
There were times when he wanted to run on the same part of the racetrack that I wanted to run on.
Exactly.
And somehow I was able to get my car up to good enough speed that I could be there on that part of the racetrack that he wanted to be on, where a lot of the other guys couldn't keep up. And, you know, that did put us at each other frequently, you know, almost constantly. one of the enjoyments that I've had along the way is being able to be a pain in the neck to Richard Petty.
There were younger challengers, including Darrell Waltrip, who learned some hard lessons from the King fast.
Well, you can see it happening right before you. They're coming to turn 3. 2 more turns to go. Richard Petty still side by side. Donnie Allison is still hanging in third. Oh! Petty has got the lead, but there comes Waltrip down below him as Petty slid up high. Donnie Allison trying to move past Petty into second place. They're coming to the finish line. It is Darrell Waltrip winning the Rebel 500. Petty is second.
I didn't get the full impact of what Richard Petty meant to this sport or who he was until I actually started to compete in it. When I stepped it up a notch and I got to run in that crowd, I was a little bit eager. That's when I really got to know Richard on a personal basis, and I'm talking like up close and personal, you know. He got the longest, get him to show you this finger right here sometime. He can stand 4 feet away from you and poke you in the chest with this finger, and it's crooked. I don't know whatever happened to him. When he comes up to you and he takes that long finger and starts pointing you in the chest, poking you in the chest, and looking at you through those dark glasses, there's some beady little eyes in behind them little dark glasses, I'm here to tell you.
I watched him on the truck. You know, I stand in the infield and watch him race, you know, and never thought I'd be racing against him. And then here I am in a race car at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and I'm fighting this big Dodge and running about 29th or 30th, and everything's all lovely in my little world. And by the time Richard Petty goes by me at about 100 miles an hour faster than I'm running, scares me to death. And, you know, you realize who he is and what he's doing. That was the first race he ever won at Charlotte, too. It was the first race I ever drove there.
The Petty name managed to escape most controversy until win number 198 at Charlotte.
Bill France runs NASCAR, and he comes in and he starts talking. He says, okay, so, you know, they got you on this tire deal, so we're going to have to work out something here, you know, how penalize you and fine you and all that. I said, okay, so they was working on something. And Dad Gumphy didn't call up there and say, hey, guys, your motor's a little bit big here. You know, and man, we just both throwed up our hands in. I said, oh, me. I said, we're in deep trouble here.
It was a tough call to make, but it had to be made. And we did not put the engine, when I say we, NASCAR, did not put the engine in the car, nor the tires on the car. I really hate it for Richard and Maurice, but somebody in the organization had to make the call, and they got called.
Perhaps the King's darkest moment came in 1988 when the hushed Daytona crowd thought they may have seen the last of the King.
They were replaying it on a closed circuit TV, and I stopped, and all at once it hit me that this was Richard in this car, and it was just flipping and coming apart, and even when it stopped in the middle of the track, he took a tremendous impact again. And I thought, the first thought in my mind was that they're not being truthful here. You know, I know he must be dead. I walked back to the area where they had brought him in, and there he lay, and he smiled, and there was not a scratch on his body.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Then in 1992, the King's final days at the Speedway almost resulted in a pole position, but one driver had other ideas.
And look at the King. He has pulled alongside the pace car, carrying the president, and they're saluting each other. President Bush with the thumbs up to King Richard Petty as he slides back now into his starting position outside the front row alongside Sterling Marlin.
We could have got the pole. I'd really love to see him got it. And, you know, our bunch worked real hard on our Speedway stuff. And I knew it was going to be close the first lap he ran. And I don't know if I beat him or not. And sure enough, when I come back around, the crowd was booing, so I knew I'd beat him.
They go 2 by 2 through the banking in turns 3 and 4. Petty to the inside, Sterling Marlin to the outside. Here they come down off the banking to about to complete lap number 1. Who is going to have the lead? They're side by side as they come down. Richard Petty is going to lead it.
That's magic, Ned. Yes, sir. That was great.
Car driver, this ESPN special, Portrait of a King, is being brought to you by the First Brands Corporation.
Here's ESPN stock car analyst Ned Jarrett.
This is where it all began, Petty Enterprises. Today, it's a high-tech racing facility. That's his first race.
When I first started running, a lot of the press did call me Dick. It's just an automatic nickname for Richard. And I don't know, they did that for a little while after I said it's always been Richard.
Watches over the streets of Randleman, North Carolina as the citizen.
Anywhere else.
Face another winner, was that a diehard? No.
Just the other day, he came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it, and as he grew, he'd say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be